Happy Tuesday, fam. Listen, for tonight's topic, you might think that I'm talking about the organizational impact that ineffective communication has. But nope, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the personal effect that it has on us when our communication skills are ineffective. We'll be back right after the intro. Happy Tuesday, family, and welcome back to Excellence in Everything Live. I am your podcast host, Lanita Hostin. I'm also the founder of Vocal Value, and we support emerging leaders with becoming better communicators at work, at home, and with themselves. And tonight's topic, while we are continuing with a series called Emerging Thought Leader, tonight's topic is specifically for us. It's that communicating with ourselves when we put those 3 points of service out there is communicating with ourselves. So the cost of ineffective communication. I want to start by saying, hey, welcome. If you are watching us for the very first time, let me know where you're watching from. Some of our viewers come back each week, and I'm very familiar with where they're watching from. But if I have never yet met you, let me know where you're watching from. Also, we're streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And let me know which platform you're viewing from too, because that also helps us with deciding where we will focus our streaming. And so, yeah, I'd appreciate that. Also, this series is coming to an end next week as we close out the month of July. We'll talk a little bit about what the finale episode is. But I would love to hear what your thoughts have been so far. So you can drop those in the comments. I am monitoring them. So I can check out your feedback. So those are kind of like a little housekeeping that I wanted to start with. But the cost of ineffective communication, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this is we talk about the value of having communication skills. And I talk about that often. In fact, a lot of the content that I share online is about the value and the byproduct of being an exceptional communicator, a powerful presenter. But let's talk about the byproduct of not developing those effective communication skills, and not just in business, not just in your office. I want to talk about how they show up and affect us in our personal lives. I have this personal thing. I don't know what to call it, but I feel like we should be the same person that we are at work and at home. There should be alignment. There shouldn't be a off and on switch. That's just how I feel. I feel like when you're living in alignment, meaning the things that you are doing is so closely associated with how you've been designed by the creator. When you're living so closely in the alignment with that, you will be the same person at home, school, in ministry, in your workplace, with your children. And I think it's important that we arrive at that place. Now, to be honest, I've never heard a person say that before. I just know what it feels like to not be in alignment and have to switch off, take off a hat or take off this and transform. I know what that feels like, and it's exhausting. So I feel like when we are in alignment, when we're closely aligned, we can be that same person. And as a result of being closely aligned, we're always nurturing and building the same person. So when you take off your hat and you have to switch characters, that character needs development too. So every time you switch, each of those people and personality traits need development. But if you are the same person, your development it has continuity. So you're building upon it. And that's the person who's evolving and maturing and is seeing the result of that in every facet of their lives. And so with that lens in mind, those of us who are aligned or desire to be in line, I feel like ineffective communication costs us operational success. And what I mean by operational is how you are showing up holistically. Holistic just means emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. It's a combination of all those things. Think of holistic for whole, your whole being. When we are ineffective in communicating, it costs our whole being operational success. And I'm good on plain language, so let me break that down even more. When we are ineffective communicators, we're saying to ourselves, I'm okay with you not being well. Likely when ineffective communication happens, there is meaning is lost. Goals and visions may not be clear. Execution may not happen to the magnitude or the capability that it could. If that lingers over time, that has an effect on us emotionally. For executors, that's draining because we're not seeing the progress, and we thrive on achievement. For those who like clarity and like to fix things, there's not anything being presented to them so that they can maneuver through their analytical, fixing mindset. And for visionaries, there's nothing to cast. There's not movement in forward thinking. So the byproduct of those things, if you think about it, over the long haul, they do affect you emotionally and mentally and spiritually and physically. So always think about this. What happens at work affects you at home. What happens at home affects you at work. Now, some of us have done a really good job of masking that, right? We put on our face. But you tell me, those of you who are watching, or if you catch the replay, snippets of that, tell me if I'm wrong, say you're wrong, Lanita. I got it down. I got it locked. It doesn't slip out. But that emotional, maybe disappointment, frustration, maybe a little bit of uneasiness, sometimes that slips out in how we communicate, how we show up. Even if you're really self-aware, it affects how you clothe yourself that day. You may find that you're not as communicative. If you're full of ideas, you may find that you don't find fulfillment in sharing those aloud. But there are quite a few byproducts as a result of ineffective communication being extended, how it tends to affect you. And so one of the ways I feel we could start to reverse the impacts of ineffective communication, we got to know ourselves so well. And to make that even more plain and clear, we have to know the why behind the feelings that we have. If something is occurring at work or in business or with your spouse, people say things like, I really can't put my finger on what that is. It's not that you can't, it's that you haven't really sat in those feelings to explore what they are. That takes time. Some of us are uncomfortable with digging that deep. Perhaps what we find and discover, and subconsciously we may know, it hurts even more to accept that truth. And I remember working with someone a few years ago. It was a female in leadership. And it's something about this woman, and I would say this out loud, something about this woman that I don't know, when I feel anxiousness when she comes in the room, or when I get a correspondence from her via email, or when she's asking me questions. I feel an uneasiness with her that I don't feel with other people. Like, what is it about this woman? What is it about her? And me sitting in that and exploring, it actually isn't her. Well, it is her, but her personality type and her communication style doesn't sit well with me. It's triggering. It reminds me of my interaction with my parents, which is triggering. It's hitting on a childhood wound. So while I'm like, oh my goodness, this lady is crazy, and she might be crazy. She might be crazy and I'm triggered. So I don't think it's always one or the other. There's the why behind the feelings that you have. And I'm using this as an example because in this regard, if I never encountered the why behind why communicating with her bothers me, then I can address it with her to clear up that um the defensiveness that I need to feel like I need to put up when I'm talking or emailing with her. That never goes away over time. So I just allow it to fester and store in my body. And we know how this goes. When we allow things inside and they stay, they continue to build up, they eventually come out. And usually not in the most controlled temperament. They're not the ideal circumstance. And I always say, we shouldn't give people the power to push a button that should not exist. So getting to 100, if that's not your character, that button should not exist. And when we allow people to push it, we're giving away that power. Part of having that power is being able to understand why something bothers you. And this is, I'm telling you, if you can master this, it's a very emotionally mature concept and emotionally mature response. But if you can master having ownership and exploring how you feel about something, and then with that, you have language to go and resolve that conflict or address that uneasiness. Addressing it doesn't mean that it goes away, but it does free that up from the storage that you leave inside your body. When we make the decision to address it, we're getting it out, acknowledging it, releasing it. That does not mean that the person whom is responding will respond well or even change. But what it does is that tension that you were feeling that was building up, at least you have given it, you've like freed it from being held within your body. When you have built up emotional stress, it shows up physically. It shows up, oh man, in so many ways. It shows up in your appetite. You might have loss of appetite. It shows up in your sleep patterns. It may be difficult for you to fall asleep. It shows up in your ability to focus. You might have difficulty focus on a task to complete it. Your mind is in disarray. Imagine your head is going like this, thinking through like ping-ponging thoughts. That's probably the best example I can use to illustrate when you are mentally exhausting yourself with the feelings and thoughts that you're harboring inside. So when you release them, that shaking you are allowing to calm. And only we can do that release. Only we can communicate that or learn the language to communicate that. It's our responsibility. So we have ownership over that. The second one that I wanted to talk about is learning your body. Like knowing your body so well, you know when you are stressed, not because the environment and deadlines have changed, but you can start to feel it in your body. There are some impacts that it has, and stress shows up differently to some of us. I've heard some people say their hair starts to shed. I heard some people say their lips are dry. Maybe they have like a pain in this side of their shoulder, stomach cramps, lower back pains. I'm telling you, it almost is. I don't like the level of awareness that I have sometimes about my body because it worries me sometimes. because now I'm thinking about it. Like I can feel stress occurring and I'm thinking about it. But what I do love about having that awareness is I can proactively begin to make changes before they cause me to be in some type of responding to some type of medical crisis. And you and I probably can name someone who perhaps may not have had that physical awareness regarding what their body was doing. And as a result, they ended up in some type of medical care or treatment, whether that have been symptoms of a heart attack, a panic attack, the inability to sleep, so extreme fatigue. Like, to me, those are that's a result of compounded um, alerts that your body may have been attempting to give you, but you didn't have awareness about. Grinding your teeth at night. So if you wake up and your muscles are tight, and you know when you grind your teeth, because typically when you wake up, it's like there's a tightness that you have. That's another one too. But we got to learn these things. I think we're gonna be our best selves when we are first well. And this is coming from the holistic coach in me. I like that while I love all things, I love the art of communicating, and I teach about that a lot. I love the science of communicating too. What I'm learning is that holistic piece and how not only scientifically our bodies are communicating with us, but also us identifying how it's communicating so we can make those best responses. And again, we have ownership over that. So when I think about the impact of effective communication, I think about the personal effect that it has on our emotional wellness, that affects so many areas of our lives. It affects how we show up in our relationships with our spouses. It affects our creative flow and energy. Think about that. When you are in a creative set, and we were designed to create, when you are in a creative flow, if you are in an emotional rut, your mind is competing. It's competing with processing those mixed or ill or feelings that you're having and creating. It's only when we are in an emotionally neutral state or a state of peace that we're going to be creating probably the best products. And I would dare to say we're going to be communicating with probably our best language, verbally, non-verbally, and visually, when we're also in a state of emotional neutrality. So they matter. So I think the cost of ineffective communication is the impact that it has holistically on our well-being. And we have to learn to identify from the root before we're verbally communicating something. How is it physically, emotionally affecting us? What questions do you have? If you are watching live, what questions do you have? And I'm going to make sure I don't miss anything, because sometimes I don't see your questions here inside of our dashboard, but then I go online and I see them. So I'm going to check to make sure I didn't miss any of them. I want to tell you this story. So I lead a small group at my church, and my group is about 25 people. It's responsible for playing a major part in a larger ministry of over maybe more than 100 individuals. And the 25 people that I lead, their well-being, their communication style, visually, verbally, non-verbally, it absolutely affects the operational success of the 100 people that we touch. So it's my job and the role that I'm in to, I would say, not only develop that group of 25, but empower them, equip them with a vision, and together we hold ourselves accountable to best serving that 100 people. So yesterday I asked the group, Um, what leadership and what leadership style, what leadership and communication style gets the best of you? And I asked them, what leadership and communication style gets the worst of you? And I asked the team, each of them, to share those things aloud. Now, I'm asking that because I want to know, as their leader, I want to know, how do I get the best of them? And what behaviors might I display that might provoke the worst in them? I also ask because I want them to know. I want them to have an awareness. Hey, I show up my best when the environment is. And I probably don't show up my best, even if I want to. I don't show up my best or the best that I could when these things occur. People got to know themselves. We have to know ourselves so well. I think that's the key to mitigating conflict, to having healthy relationships, healthy friendships that are sustained even through conflict and disappointment. Knowing ourselves so we are accountable for how we're showing up. And that is not the fault of someone else or because things didn't happen. And in some cases, while that may be true, there's always a part that we play in how an interaction unfolds. And we can't take ownership of something we don't have awareness about. So I'm asking them these things because I genuinely want to know, but I want them to know. And I would charge you with the same questions like, what gets the best? What communication style and leadership style gets the best of you? And what communication and leadership style gets the not so best version of you? And when you can answer those things, it empowers you. It empowers you. And we had about 15 people on the call. Only one person said they didn't know. Everyone else they were ready to share, like, oh yeah, I know this. And a lot of what they shared, they get the best when the environment is transparent and when the instructions are clear. And I could appreciate that because I feel the same way. And there were a lot of different things they said about getting the worst of them. But I challenge you, if you have a group, to ask them those same questions so that you all can not only learn each other, but each person can have an awareness of themselves. And these are really small things, small kinds of thought-provoking questions that we should be having when we're leading a group. And especially if that group is responsible for a larger segment of a population. So, really quickly, if you are ever wondering how we can work together, here are 3 ways. You can hire me to coach you. That coaching is determined by your needs. Some people come for public speaking coaching. Some people come for just coaching in general. And you can also bring me in to speak. I have quite a few speaking engagements in August. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then finally, we can partner on a leadership program or initiative that you may have. So let's say you have an existing group of talent and they need development, but you don't have the internal staff to host that, or you don't have the curriculum for them to develop. We can create the curriculum and we can also facilitate it. And so those are 3 ways we can work together. Also, after the podcast, I invite you to come backstage for us to chat for about 15 minutes. What questions or thoughts you have that you may want to talk through, any of the ideas that were brought up that might have gave you a light bulb moment that you want to process. I invite you to join me backstage, and you can go to vocalvalue.com/ETL. That's an acronym for Emerging Thought Leader. That's the series that we're in. So if you go to vocalvalue.com/ETL, you can join me backstage. And there's no email opt-in or anything. It's literally click the button, you're backstage. So if you want that extra touch, that's there. And we're wrapping up this series, Emerging Thought Leader, next Tuesday with presenting to decision makers. So we're going to talk about those key elements that should be included when you are presenting to decision makers. Things that we should be keeping in mind, elements of our presentation that absolutely should be excluded, and those that should be included. And finally, I want to share that I'm hitting the road. I mentioned this really briefly, but I am hitting the road in August. I'll be traveling to several universities and colleges and I will not be hosting the podcast during that time. It gets a little challenging when you're traveling through time zones to maintain a structure. And I have tried it before. I just don't like how it feels. I don't show up my best. I'm not always as energized or always have the time to best prepare. So to mitigate that, I take a break for the month of August, but we'll be back in September. And we likely will do some ad hoc lives because we have some events that are coming up that I definitely want you to know about. But I did want you to know next Tuesday will be our last episode until September since I'll be on the road. I don't see any questions. Let me look one more time, make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't see any questions. But what was your key takeaway? Tell me what your key takeaway was from what was shared today. We talked about the cost of ineffective communication being the impact that it has on us holistically, our well being, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and as a byproduct of that, how that affects other areas of our lives. It kind of spills over. We talked about that. And if any of those things resonate with you, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear it. All right. So I don't see any questions or comments. I appreciate you joining me live. It's always a pleasure to spend my Tuesdays with you. I'll see you next Tuesday as we discuss presenting to decision makers. So if you know someone who has a really important presentation coming up, maybe they're sitting in front of a C-suite audience or their senior or executive team, and they want to brush up on those presentation skills, definitely invite them to come. And I would love to spend that time with them. I appreciate you as always. Thank you for being a active listener of Excellence in Everything Live. I'm Lanita Hostin. I love you. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next week.